Okay, so today I have the pleasure of talking with Taka Shikano, who is an executive sales and global digital marketing leader. Taka, it's an absolute pleasure to be talking with you today. Thank you very much. Could you please just start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thank you for this opportunity, James. My name is Taka Shikano. Working for various tech companies in the last 20 years, and I've been speaking English as a second language for the last 20 plus years. And since right now, I think it's more than 7,139 languages are spoken on this planet, and I think 23 primary languages are spoken. But I think if you look at English, 1.3 billion people speak English. But when you look at the non-native English speaker who speaks English as a second language, roughly about 70% of people speak English as a second language. So I really have a passion about how we can build more inclusive work and personal environment on this planet. So I'm really happy to discuss with you, James.
Thank you very much. What is it like, from your perspective, living and working in English as an additional language?
I would say, I think, how I felt is, I think it has been changing, depends on my situation. So if I'm, let's say, moved to the US or different countries for the first time, I think, I felt fear, anxiety, almost like 24/7, like first 6 months, because I don't, even if I learned English when I was in Japan, still people speak English and how they use English as a first language. Here, in my case, in the US, it's totally different, and also culture is different, and the expectation from society is different. So I was really wanted to be very careful what I said, how I behave. Also, sometimes how I spoke in English, what I learned from my country was inappropriate here in the US, or people don't use it. So I think a lot of mixed feeling, anxiety, fear, but at the same time, excitement to see, if I look back 6 months ago, 9 months ago, oh, maybe I grew up, or I learned a lot from the society.
Yes. Yeah. And you say that there are differences in the way that people use English, I think you said in Japan, and the way it's used in the United States. Right. I suppose it's a slightly different thing, isn't it? In the sense that if you're living in the United States, then in a way, perhaps you want to, or people would want to, integrate into the culture to some degree, and therefore you adapt your English to fit that situation. But that might be different if you're working in a multinational team where English is actually simply a means of communication. It's not necessarily about integrating into, let's say, American or British culture in that context. Would that be a fair point?
Yeah, I would say yes. So I think, if you work for global 500 Fortune companies, I think English is the communication tool skills that you want to engage with partners and internal stakeholders. Yes, but I think, if every company has own culture. So I think, even, if you speak like English as a second language, you also need to understand the company culture, right? And adapt it if you join the company for the first time. But yeah, does that make sense?
Yes, I think it does. Yeah, it seems that there are almost two pressures. One is language and the other is culture, be that national or be that company culture. And those two together, I think, seem to put quite a lot of pressure, quite a lot of work on people who are operating in English as a second language. Have you ever experienced problems in the way that native English speakers communicate?
Yeah. So I don't know if it's gonna be a problem, but I would say opportunities or differences between people from Western culture and then people from Asian culture, right? So I usually use that, people like myself, like from Asia or Japan, China, Korea, I think, we are defined as a high context society. So meaning is that we, let's say, for example, Japan, roughly about 97 to 98% of population is Japanese. So, and also we prefer indirect communication because, we are expecting other people to read line by line. So we don't need to say everything what we are thinking about, but maybe say we're going to express our interest and concern, probably like 30 to 50% or 60%, depends on people. And then we don't use like a lot of hand gestures to express ourselves, right? But in the US or like UK, in the Western culture, I think it's people are more dialect and express their concerns and interest.
I read in one of your recent posts, which you called "The Power of Thoughtful Leadership, Elevating Organizations to New Heights," which is a really interesting read. For anyone listening to this, go to LinkedIn and read the post. It's fantastic. And you said there 87% of employees feel motivated when their leaders show empathy and understanding of them.
Yes.
And empathy, understanding, they're words that traditionally we don't associate with leadership and large corporations, but they are becoming more common now. How important is empathy and understanding in people's use of language?
I would say more important when you have conversation between native and non-native English speaker. I think a non-native English speaker needs to process, and sometimes it's the process to translate it into native language and then say something in English. So it takes time, but I think, more patient and understanding of differences and also like challenges that people have to speak up English as a second language. Because, obviously, if you speak English as a language, English as a second language, your accent pronunciation is pretty much tied to your mother language. So I think sometimes, in my case, or we don't pronounce L and R in Japanese. So when I moved to the US for the first time, it was extremely hard to pronounce that. I'm still having a hard time. It depends on the day, because maybe Monday, Tuesday, early in the week, I think, my brain's fresh, so I think it's easier to communicate. But Friday, like, late Friday, if I'm exhausted, my brain isn't functioning, and also my mouth also isn't functioning. So it's just, more patient and respect and show differences. I think it would be great to show your empathy and respect for people from different countries.
There's so much that's very interesting in what you've just said there. And thank you for sharing that. One of the things that, even though I've been a teacher for a long time, and actually a language examiner for a long time, I've just realized I can still fall into the trap of imagining that someone's level of English is fixed at a particular level. So they have 100 on the TOEFL score, or I don't know, 7 on the IELTS score, and that's where they are.
Yep.
And what you've said has just reminded me that this is actually a snapshot of one moment in time. And what you were sharing is that, in your example, maybe early on a Monday morning at the beginning of the week, the mental agility is there and the physiological energy is there in terms of pronunciation, but that can change. So that's an interesting thing just for me to remember, and perhaps other native speakers, that someone's English can vary with energy levels over time.
Right.
So thank you for reminding me of that. It's something I've not thought of in that context for some time. And the other interesting thing that you mentioned, and again, thank you for sharing this, is that I think as someone who speaks English as a second language, you were saying you're very much aware that your accent is different.
Right.
To native speakers, and mine clearly is different to yours. And I think what you were saying, more generally, is that can lead ESL speakers to a self-consciousness, some anxiety, and that can lead to sometimes not wanting to speak up in meetings, perhaps being reluctant to contribute. And therefore, I'm guessing the message there, native speakers need to empathize with that and make communication a safer place, as it were.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I know that.
And also, I think. Oh no, sorry about that. Is that okay?
Yeah. No, please. I was just.
Yeah. And also, I think, I don't know about China, Korea, some other like Asian countries, but I think in Japan, how we learn and educate it when we are in school, it's more like, we need to be very quiet, show respect to the teachers, and also, I don't know, things might change, but I think, when I was in the school, I think, very quiet, and then just, ask questions to the teacher, maybe at the end of every class. And we cannot be like over aggressive. And but also like we learn English, but I think mainly for reading, writing, but not much opportunity for us to like listening and speaking. So, but I think when I moved to the US, joined the tech company, I think I was so impressed that I think a lot about Western people, when they speak English as a native or non-native, I think they have a lot of confidence. But I was like, wow, because I think I think Asian culture, I think there are a lot of opportunities to show confidence more, because but I think it just ties to how we educated in the past. Yeah, I think but that's my 2 cents. Yeah.
Thank you.
So how, communication style, confidence, yeah.
And I guess strategically for companies, there's a need to put these things together in order to ensure effective communication between colleagues.
Yeah. I think it doesn't mean if you can speak language English fluently, it doesn't mean you get things done, right? But I think as a company, organization needs to also look at differences and with diverse background more. So I think each company organization can improve more. Improve organization and detaining a good talent at the global level. Yep. Yeah.
You mentioned you mentioned diversity and the importance of that for companies. And I know that in some of the work you've done before, you have been key in advocating that diversity, equity, and inclusion work should include people who speak English as a second language. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
So I think, lots of companies talk about diversity and inclusion to let's say increase women's manager ratio or minority to be hired for the tech company or bring them to executive level. But I was a little bit curious about how come people don't talk about English as a second language employees who always have opportunities and challenges to improve themselves, because like I said, 1.3 billion speak English as English, and 70% of them are non-native English speakers. And I think every company has employee who speaks English as a second language. So I ideally wanted to just increase awareness of opportunities and challenges that we face daily basis. I'm gonna repeat myself, but I think there are a lot of challenges, opportunities to understand differences who speaks English as a second language. So I decided to join diversity and inclusion virtual team at my previous company, and then a few stakeholders agreed to do ESL initiative for our annual organization session. So does that make sense?
It does. And it's very interesting to me because, as you say, when we think about diversity and inclusion, or DEI, depends on what term you use. I tend to say diversity and inclusion, but when we think about diversity and inclusion, we do tend to immediately think of things such as gender, race, religion, perhaps physical disabilities, mental health, all of which are very important. And I think it's great that those things are being looked at and thought about, and people are being better represented, and policies can be put in place to include everybody and also to get the best out of them. But it's always surprised me, going back to your figures, 60-70% of a workforce are having to operate in a second language. And this is just not thought about at executive level as a diversity or inclusion problem. I just find that surprising.
Yeah. Yeah, James, I also agree. Like, like you said, people talk about gender, race differences, right? But yeah, I think people speaks English as a second language. I think they're maybe like more, I don't know, not everyone, but quiet than like people from Western countries. So I just wanted to advocate and help and increase awareness of uh, challenges, because I think that's the one of our crucial elements that we as a society company need to take it consideration. So yeah.
And it seems a very important one financially as well. There are lots and lots of general statistics about miscommunication. I think one of them that comes to mind is miscommunication can cost $26,000 per employee per year in lost productivity. And actually, in some ways, that can be quite hard to relate to. But it's actually a staggering figure when you think about it. And we often look at that, look at communication generally, but we fail to analyze and appreciate how much can be lost if we do not consider the needs and the inclusion of ESL speakers, which I think is precisely what you were trying to do in the work that you pioneered. What sort of results did you manage to achieve from your work in D&I and ESL speakers?
So I think that was one of great D&I initiatives that we drove as an organization. So we had a chance to execute both internal and external events to talk about ESL challenges in partnership with key executives. And I think, so I don't have like specific numbers to show and talk about outcomes, but I think, it was great to see lots of feedback from audiences, and then share their feedback to us. And then they say, oh, like, we didn't think about it and how, you process language or cultural differences. So I think it's great to see awareness of our initiative, and hopefully, like, we not only myself, but other team members or other organization can just leverage and continuously increase awareness ESL challenges and opportunities, so we can be better as an organization and also person for now and also in the future for like kids and like some other future opportunities we may have. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, it's again, I find it a fascinating area, because a lot of D&I, it seems, begins with representation, and I think quite rightly, but there's a sometimes unspoken idea of quotas. We must have so many people from this background in senior management, or so many people with this sexual orientation in these positions, or whatever. And clearly that's, I think, a really important thing for representation, for visibility. But with ESL speakers, in a way, the representation side is already there, as you say, 60, 70, 75% in some multinationals. But it's the inclusion that was, and still is arguably, lacking. And in a way, I don't know if you would agree with me on this, and perhaps I'm being too optimistic, but the inclusion problem seems quite a simple one to solve. In that we're not having to recruit lots and lots of people in order to gain the representation. They're already there. And what you're sharing is that the success that was achieved came from raising awareness. And people think, I didn't realize that, or I never thought about it. No one had told me. And if I just change my behavior, my communication a little bit, we can easily become much more inclusive. Perhaps I'm too optimistic or being too simplistic, but is that what you've experienced, or am I misinterpreting what you're sharing?
No, I think, I would say, James, yes and no. So I think, when people join our session, they try to understand and also they're very happy to hear from us. But, in general, people forget, right? So unless, you are experienced by yourself, or you are physically in the culture society and experience by yourself, it's gonna resonate with them. But I think if you just if you don't keep experiencing daily basis, I think people people tend to forget. I mean, I'm not saying this is good or bad, but that's the reality. So that's why we need to keep promoting and increasing awareness of what we are facing every single day.
But what advice would you give corporate leaders who are listening to this podcast and maybe thinking about including ESL speakers in their DEI initiatives and policies? What should they do?
I would say be patient and respect differences and show empathy. And I think, we can go from there.
Taka, I think we are coming near to the end of the time that we had booked for the session. Is there anything else?
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask? Maybe one or a few questions to you, James.
Please.
So when you see or meet with people from different countries and cultures, or who speaks English as a second language, what is your expectation or maybe or desire to engage with them or understand them? Because I just I'm just curious what you're thinking about when you meet with people from different cultures and who speaks English as a second language.
Yeah, that's a very good question. For me, I find it fascinating. Now, I am generalizing, but it's a great opportunity to learn more about the individual I'm talking to, about their culture, about what they do, and their view of the world, if I put this in general terms, because I think so much is influenced by our culture and also by the language we use. And I feel very, very lucky, if I'm honest, that I speak English as my first and actually my only language, because it means that I think I can go anywhere and be understood. That's not entirely true, because I know that native speakers can cause problems and I need to adjust and be respectful and patient and think about what I'm saying. But I don't have to put the same effort, to be honest, into my English as someone who speaks it as a second language does. But I've also been very privileged because I've been a non-native speaker when I worked in Africa. I was there for a year. And I had to learn a language. I had to learn a language called 𝗀𝗂𝘂𝗶𝘁𝘆. I can't even pronounce that. 𝗃𝗂𝗂𝗂, with one of the clicks from the side of the mouth. It's very similar to Zulu and very different to English. And I was hopeless, and I was nervous, I was anxious, I didn't speak up.
Yeah.
But I had to keep trying, because if I didn't, I couldn't buy anything at the shop, I couldn't get any transport, I couldn't make friends, and I couldn't do any work. And I really came to value the kindness, the empathy, and the adjustment of the native speakers of that language, who realized that I couldn't understand fast speech, I couldn't understand the long words, and they adjusted for me. They didn't treat me like I was simple, like I was an idiot, because that's not the case. They just knew that I had a problem learning the language. And so I've seen it and experienced it from that side, which really changes my personal view of what it's like trying to live and work in English as a second language.
Okay, great. James, thank you for sharing. And I just have one last question before we wrap this up. Is that okay?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so is there anything we can do from a non-English native speaker's perspective who has not lived in different countries, or has not experienced different cultures, just to understand more about opportunities and challenges that we may have in the future? Because like you said, you have lived in Africa. That's that's gonna resonate, and also like start thinking about differences, challenges that lots of English as a English who speaks as a second language. But is there anything we can do to help to native English speaker moving forward, so we can have more build more inclusive, diverse work and personal environment?
So this is what non-native speakers can do to help promote this. Yeah. A number of things come to mind. A number of things stand out for me. I think one of the things that can happen is that non-native speakers take all the responsibility on themselves. And a non-native speaker who doesn't understand a native speaking British person or an American person or whatever, the non-native speaker will say, it's my fault. It's a one-way problem. And that isn't always the case. So I think there is a need to avoid making native speakers gods, putting them on a pedestal. And instead to be proud of your own ability to be multilingual and to have learned another language and be able to express yourselves very well in that, actually. So I think it is recognizing how much people achieve when they are able to speak English as a second language, not thinking that native speakers are perfect. And also, I think it can really help to communicate about communication. There's nothing wrong with telling native speakers, you know what? After I've been working in English as my second language all week, I'm exhausted. It's hard work. Do you understand me? Because I promise you, many of us wouldn't even have thought of that because we haven't experienced.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Is there anything else that you'd like to ask or share? Or?
Oh no, I'm I really enjoy discussing with you, James, and I really appreciate it, this opportunity, so I can increase awareness of our daily challenges and opportunities. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Taka. Thank you very much indeed.